Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Richards, Technical Services Manager of the Managing General Agents Association, and on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our briefing this afternoon. This is being delivered by Addresscloud on the subject of real-time accumulation, the new risk selection quandary. Before I introduce our presenters, I'd just like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and camera are turned off. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Time allowing, these will be asked and answered at the end of the event. If we run out of time, questions will be answered post-event. There will be some poll questions just to assure you that these will be anonymous. This presentation is accredited for CPD hours if relevant to your ongoing professional development programme. The briefing is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be issued post-event together with our feedback survey. Please take the time to complete our survey, which will take no longer than 2 minutes. This allows us to deliver the best possible future events to our members. So to recap, today's briefing is on the subject of real-time accumulation, the new risk selection quandary from Addresscloud. So let me introduce you to our presenters, Simon de la Hoyd and Mark Varley. Simon is a sales director at Addresscloud. Simon has over 30 years experience in the geospatial industry in both sales and technical roles. Simon has worked in sales for the past 20 years, most notably heading the sales and client delivery divisions at LexisNexis. Mark is CEO and founder of Addresscloud. Mark is a geospatial specialist and entrepreneur with a background in consulting and solution architecture with over 20 years experience working in the insurance services sector. So without further ado, enjoy the briefing, everyone. And Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Welcome. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, for joining Mark and I this afternoon. So our agenda is just to briefly introduce the topic that we want to talk about today, and then use a series of use cases to prove that, to talk through that, to give examples within the accumulation and the real-time accumulation side of geospatial analysis. And as Tim mentioned, there's be lots of time for questions towards the end. And I'm going to first just talk about the learning objectives, and this will kind of encapsulate the introduction. We want to talk and focus on several areas that are important constituent parts of getting it right when it comes to managing accumulation. The first of those is addressing and the quality of the ability to locate risk. Secondly, we want to focus on how you go about providing the meaning, the reasoning as to why the implementation of the pre-bind stage, the early stage of accumulation view and accumulation view and analysis is fundamentally important to the success of the business from a profitability perspective. And thirdly, we'll move on to outline more of a holistic post-bind view of accumulation and why getting very specific about how you look at accumulation by individual peril types is important, and what that can bring again to the profitability of the book and the loss ratio within the book. And then finally, we'll also talk about events happening in real time, and also historic events, and how we can analyze those and give what we think is a pretty deep insight into the level of loss and the mix of risk that is held within that loss event. So those are some of the learning objectives. If we flick to the next slide. The Addresscloud as a business, we've been in the market since 2015. We've had historically 4 principal pillars of our service. Everything is centered around geospatial visualization and analysis. It's centered around using really high quality data. It's centered around putting that high quality data into services that solve problems that underwriters and pricing managers and portfolio managers are facing each day. Number one pillar from our first day of inception as a business was around address capture and the geocoding of addressing, the dual aspect of being able to identify and match against an address, typically from here in the UK, for example, we work heavily with the Ordnance Survey and the Royal Mail, and then to be able to pin that location onto the map and pin it in a database spatially so that we can do various pieces of analysis with it. And the analysis we do is part of the other pillars: peril scoring, that location for the purposes of shouldn't I underwrite it? How should I price it? All of those classic challenges that need to be understood at an address level. And then the next pillar is around property data, to be able to understand the characteristics of the property and how those characteristics can affect the price, and how you can identify properties that maybe look standard through one lens, but through a detailed lens, you understand very quickly are somewhat non-standard properties for various reasons, whether that's in the commercial or the residential side. The same property data is utilized for pre-filling quotations as well. So the customer journey process. So then there's a fifth pillar. And if we flick to the next slide, this is the embodiment of work that we at Addresscloud have been undertaking for the last 9 to 12 months, which is to build a real-time accumulation management view. There are several problem statements. The one we've rounded on today is one that we believe will become more and more important in the market over, it already is important, but it will become, we think, squarely into the area of geospatial analysis in the coming months and years, certainly. And that's the point about capital adequacy and ensuring that the capital adequacy based on the density, quantity, and stacking and clashing of risks is properly managed and understood by the business and is provisioned for. Typically today, that is something that is very much done as a post-bind, possibly 1 to 3 months post-bind. Once bordereaux have been gathered and analysed and CAP modelling teams have been instigated with the data and they have carried through their process, there is then at that point, a view of the level of accumulation in the roll-up. We're bringing that forward to the now, to the point of underwriting and being able to give the underwriting teams and the portfolio teams a clear view, an absolutely clear sense accurately as to what that level of accumulation is. This graphic, think of this, appreciate there's a lot of colors and a lot of dots and circles and the like on the screen. Look at it in 3 sections: left, middle, and right. On the left are a series of data sets, peril data sets predominantly, that we work with to provide peril view and property characteristic views to our clients. Those are ingested into our platform, which is the middle section, which is a series of front-end applications with some pretty funky user interfaces that we're going to show a little bit of shortly, and API services that underpin those applications. A core thing to us, and any of your IT teams would be happy to hear this, is that every capability that we have in terms of providing data, whether analysis, insight, is callable through our APIs. We don't build anything with the data on the left without building it through the APIs through the middle. That's really very important, and it helps our clients to know that they can utilize our data in any different application that they wish to parent it to across their business, as well as through the applications we can provide. On the right-hand side are the business challenges and the capabilities that are being solved by the combination of the data and the services. So the accumulation management piece at the top towards the right, the accumulation management element there is the piece that we have developed over the last 9 to 12 months, and we're going to talk you through in more detail here and now. But you will see through the course of the presentation connections into geocoding, property data, and peril scoring. I can move to the next slide. So a small excerpt of the organizations that we're working with across those pillars of our business, across geocoding, peril, risk selection, property data, and accumulation. So our partner company, our client, Allied World, has been particularly an early adopter with the services that you're going to see today. So I'm going to move on. So we're going to cut to a demonstration in a moment or two, and we're going to cut this into 4 different sections. I'm going to talk through post-bind here, and I'm going to hand to Mark, who's going to talk through the pre-bind use case, and then we're going to carry on with the event side and also talk a little bit about the data ingestion, your data, risk data. So the key piece around post-bind is the ability to identify hotspots of accumulated risk throughout your book. To be able to do that, we need to be able to take that view of your book and ingest it into our service. So we have a poll question here. So yeah, thanks, Tim. Tim's put up onto the screen. So the question is, how frequently is your risk data, your accumulation risk data, updated through your systems? The options are either daily or weekly, monthly, quarterly, longer, or you do not have access to an accumulated view. I greatly appreciate it. Just give a few moments to click on the value, the time period which best identifies the situation that you have. It's looking good. There's quite a few, there's more than any other that have a daily update of that accumulated view, which is positive to hear. Why is that positive to hear? Because that means the plugging in of that daily view of data into what you're about to see in terms of the services we offer is very, couldn't be better, apart from maybe being absolutely to the moment the policy is bound. So we have some results. 43% of the audience have a daily view of the updated risk data. No one on weekly, 14% on monthly, no one on quarterly, 14% longer, and 29% do not have an access to a view of accumulation at all. So thank you for that. We're going to do 3 more of those through the course of the presentation, but from this point we shall move on. So the post-bind use case, the post-bind business case, is to rapidly identify and manage these hotspots, to be able to aggregate exposure using various different peril-specific geospatial boundaries to do that, and then to filter those boundaries based on the actual score at address level of the policies that you are writing within that exposure, that aggregated zone. That's a high-level piece. If we flick to the next slide, we have built 2 very specific peril views, sets of boundaries. One relates to fire, the next relates to flood. So we've created, as it says here, over 100 million what we are calling fire blocks. So this is taking building outline data, building outlines, and then simulating a fire spread based on a 5-meter spread of fire from building to building. So we've buffered buildings and we have created new boundaries that are amalgamations of buildings that are within 5 meters of each other. And we maintain those, and then we analyze those against your risk data. So we have 500 of the top, biggest, largest cities by population across the world that we have processed in their entirety with this view. You're going to see that in a couple of moments. The next slide talks about our partnership with JBA, the experts in flood modeling, and our utilization of their hydrological accumulation zones, which act as areas where flood events will spread. So at any location on the ground, we can tell you about the likely areas around it to be affected by that same event. So these are contiguous, so nested polygons across the world that show at some different resolutions of granularity the flood catchments of what you can expect to be and the extent of an event if it were to occur at the location of your risk, and then we accumulate it accordingly. So yeah, Mark's got the keys on the demo. So we're going to switch into our risk service, our real-time accumulation service, and just go through a couple of examples.
Yeah, just bear with me. So I'm just going to move that. So it's on a different screen. So I'm just going to bring up a different screen share.
Okay.
And yeah, that's good. That's all good to go. I'll reshare in now.
So I'll do a couple of moments of orientation around the screen, what you're looking at. It's obviously new to you all. So there are three areas, pieces of real estate here within the screen. One is the map. It's very evident. Across the top is a pseudo spreadsheet type view, tabular view of the risk data that is rendered onto the map. And towards the left-hand side, where it says top fire blocks, that area and below it is what we term the widgets. So we created a series of widgets that are individual pieces of analysis. As Mark's going around the pie chart there, it pulls out each country, and you can see there's a net exposure of 1.54 trillion. But what we also have there in that particular country, which one did you select there, Mark? I couldn't spot it. It will bring forward the amount of risk that is in each of those countries. What you see on the map is the world split by hexagons. We utilize hexagons because they're a fantastic way of being able to represent thematically the level of risk across areas. Of course, hexagons nest perfectly with each other, unlike circles, which are very important to use as well. But when showing data at this type of global level, and as Mark's doing, zooming into a more regional level, the hexes are really powerful. They're showing where these hotspots of risk are. There's a little legend on the right-hand side, which will drop down, and this shows the RAG values of the I think it's the net exposure that's on that number. And these RAGs can be set to your tolerances, to your choosing. So everything that's on the map at the moment is listed within the tabular view across the top. And above the table view are some summary pieces of information that tell you that there's just over £1 trillion worth of net exposure in the view that we're looking at here on the map screen, and that consists of over 729,000 individual locations. Appreciate it's more of a techie thing, but the speed at which we are able to render and analyze and change all the data as it's connected between the widgets, the table, and the map is extremely fast because of things we've done and choices we've made about how we've built and architected this tool. And so what you're getting is that immediacy of analysis. That's the primary parts of the user interface. We can do things like expand the map view, so that's completely consumes the whole screen. We can view the whole table, so that consumes the whole screen. But what I'm going to do now is just look into more of the functionality. Yeah, as Mark's going across there, all of this data that you're seeing in the table, this is largely, of course, and it's a dummy file, of course, as you would expect for the purposes of a demonstration, but is data that would be provided, all of the fields by our clients. And so we can put onto this view any information that you wish to see. Mark, if you could just click on the table view, the piece that enables us to select the columns that are visible. This is another piece here, so you can switch on and switch off and reorder the data that is in that tabular view to your own preferences. You're also able to sort the data by the values in it, ascending, descending, and also able to filter it also based on value or based on a text, piece of text. So yeah, an insured name. We love using KFC as an example because it's known by all. And so we'll pull all of those locations. We can see that we're over 2,683. over exactly that number of KFCs in this dummy file with its net exposure, and can see the locations of those. And we're going to talk more about the fire blocks that you keep seeing flashing up between red, amber, and green on the left-hand side in a minute. But all of that data, that if that's as far as you want it to go and rank that information based on exposure, the file can be exported to Excel. One of the principles of this is that it's not answering every detailed question you have about that set of risks and its accumulation. It's very much taking you to a point and saying, well, okay, now you've identified the risks that are of concern, to then be able to take that onto your local machine and be able to do further analysis and pivot and run through other Excel processes is very important. So it's very much about getting from the macro to the micro. So yeah, let's go with an example. If Mark, you can just tap France into the search. So there's an address search view here, and actually, if you switch it to Questa, if you would. So we have various map layers that we've been so far just working with hexes, but we've now turned on the Questas. If you could just zoom out a little bit, Mark, so it just has the whole of France on that view, and then click on France itself. So what we'll see immediately is the level of exposure that we have within France. And we've got all the stats that I've talked about already: location numbers, TIV, net exposure, and fire blocks, which we're coming on to in a second. If we zoom back in a little bit, the Questa boundaries will expand to this view. And if I go in a little bit further, I think, yeah, I was going to go to Paris and just click on that little area. So you can see that's the red zone. It's kind of not unexpected, but of course, any other hotspots across the area will be identified as well. So what we have it is this semi-natural hotspot that you would expect from Paris, but we're analyzing Paris in detail. So the grid of 9 little cards on the left-hand side show the top fire blocks. So top left is the most exposed fire block in Paris. So if we click on that, it'll take us to that location. There are 7 insured risk locations within that fire block. And if we click on any one of those blocks, we will see detail about it. We will see policy detail. We'll see some insured information, street address information. And of course, what we've got across the top is telling us it's 28 million and it's 6 locations. So coming back to what we've done at an international level, we processed over 100 million building outlines, and we've processed, in accordance with that, 500 of the largest cities across the world. So there is huge coverage of this to be able to go anywhere in the globe that you are writing business and be able to get this level of view. So what Mark's done here is change. We quite like the black and white map rather than the Google styled map. But that's just our kind of geospatial nerdiness, I suppose, a little bit. But what you've got now as we zoomed out is, and then we're back to the more Google type view and the Bing type view and OpenStreetMap, is all of the fire blocks that are in that vicinity in Paris. So green is in a good shape. Again, the legend will tell us that it's okay at green and what the thresholds are, and you can set these. We have some amber risks as well. And what you'll notice about the blocks is, yes, it's taken individual building outlines, used that 5-meter separation, and then created a new set of boundaries, which we call fire blocks, and is reporting upon that. So just to prove its kind of internationalness, if we can pop Singapore into the view there, Mark. Thank you. It goes to that location, and as we zoom in, the fire blocks will become visible. There they are, and at any time I can go to the grid of 9 and I can select each one of those. I can iterate through them, and I'll see there are 14 locations. Here we are, another 14 in that building as well. So I think speed is important, the speed at which we're able to get you to the area of concern and interest. Hopefully you can see that through how we've interacted with the interface here. There's 1.2 million records that are constantly being analysed for the movements around the world and within and out of cities that we've got there. I'm going to move away from the fire blocks to show Cresta for a second. And if we could just go to Japan. And turn on the Crestas. And if we zoom in a little bit, the Cresta zones become a little bit more granular. And we're going to go to Osaka, which is the more kind of left of the two red areas. We'll zoom into Osaka there. And by clicking on that Cresta zone, what I've now got are the 6,600 plus locations that fall into that into that Cresta zone. And I'm just going to do a filter on the net exposure. So net exposure that is in excess of £5 million. So I can do that by just setting up a simple query. I can start to nest or to layer these queries as well. So what I've now done is bring down from that previous number down to 226 with a 1.7 billion TIV, the profile of that Cresta zone within which Osaka fits. And I can, like I did earlier, do the export of that 226 to Excel, and then I have that file to hand on my download list. I'm going to do one more location, which is Newcastle in the United Kingdom. And this time it's going to be about looking at flood rather than fire and Cresta or hexagon. And yeah, if we put that on. So just slightly to the west of the centre of Newcastle and Gateshead is the red zone that you see there. And if we click on that red zone, we can bring forward the 141 locations that are at risk within it. So then remember, this is telling you about if an event were to occur within one of your risks that falls inside of this area, what are the natural extents of that event and that flood catchment that you would expect to be on for across that. So if in the table we just pan across to the right hand side, we have the flood score, and we can descend that and see that within the catchment, of course, there are going to be properties that have no severity score for exposure to flood towards the bottom of the list, but at the top, there are going to be a number that are concerning to you. So we can run again a filter on a flood score and say, can you please tell me all of the locations within this area that are a flood score of greater than or equal to 8? And we bring that back and we've got 61 locations. So those are the 61 most concerning locations if that flood event were to occur in that area. And we can click on the top one, who's got a net exposure of a decent amount, 447k, and it takes us immediately to that. And funnily enough, it's at Greg's on the embankment of the Tyne there. So that's that location. We see the property details and the policy details on the left hand side as well. I'm going to pause. That's the piece on post-bind. I'm going to pause at this point to hand back over to Mark. Hopefully there are some questions on this. Please do write them into the chat, and we'd be really happy to take those towards the end of the presentation. But at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mark to talk through the pre-bind piece.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Simon. So yeah, pre-binds, really the questions we're looking here is obviously, can I write this risk? So it's great to have this post-bind capability, and Simon's shown all of the building blocks and the functionality that we've created. We have a simplified view of this, again, using exactly the same data, exactly the same concepts and techniques that we have available via an API, and also available via an underwriting tool that we have available, which can be linked into your own system. So the idea here is to prevent you writing in an area, or your underwriters writing in an area where you don't want them to because you're already overexposed. That's been done. I mean, other people have done that in the past using radii. What we think is quite unique is the way we're doing it with the fire blocks that we've shown. And again, there'll be a lot of people on this call who think, well, the international stuff's great, but my books is predominantly UK. We've done this. We've done the top 500 cities in the world, but in the UK, we've done this for every building in the UK. So we've got complete 100% coverage across the UK. So that'd be in industrial estates and urban and suburban areas. We've done all of the buildings in the UK. So this is something that should hopefully really resonate for you. So just before I go into my section, we've got another poll, if that's okay. So I'll just leave that up on the screen, and you should see magically, you should see the poll popping up now. And again, what we're looking at here is really understanding at the moment. So I know I used to work in the past in RSA. We had some capability initially of doing this kind of stuff with a postcode, and I know a lot of people use postcode tables for this. So really understanding, and actually I'm seeing that here in some of the results as they're coming in now. So there are people who either have access to it or access to it at postcode level. But yeah, as I say, what we're trying to do here is providing that information at truly a building level. We've actually got a few people who are already looking at the building level, which is fantastic. That's really kind of great news that you're able to do that. So I think we'll give another 10 seconds or so just for that poll to complete. So I think we're missing but we've got about 58% participation. So if you haven't already, fingers on the buzzers and please feel free to vote. I think we're going to probably close the poll there. So that's great. Thank you very much. So yeah, actually the top level is quite surprising. The top level for me anyway is that it is at building level. Again, I'm not sure how many people are using the concept of the fire block. Sometimes a building might be quite a potentially quite a narrow view. So understanding that adjacency and which other properties around could be impacted is something that we're going to demonstrate here. And then we have some people at postcode level. And then I'd say probably equally split between building and not having a view at all. So again, hopefully for the people who haven't got a view at all, we'll be able to show a little bit more about what's capable. So really, as I say, the idea here is to take the same information that we've seen in our post-bind view that Simon has demonstrated and apply those limits. So those RAG statuses and scores that you saw when we showed the various different fire blocks, that same information is available in a service that can be consumed at the point of quotation to mean that hopefully you don't get in those oranges and reds and that everything stays green. That's what we want to see, is a nice map there where everything's green really. So the way that works practically is that those limits can be defined. As Simon mentioned at the beginning, everything we do is at API level. So we define those at API level, and then we will expose an API that allows you to say, okay, I'd like to write this property in Canary Wharf, for example, and then receive a response back immediately in real time to say, well, if you were to write that risk, we're actually already at 80% of our capacity in that property. And again, the idea there is not necessarily to say no, but providing that information through to maybe your junior underwriters, to your frontline staff, through perhaps even to some of your external users, and being able to stop at that point, generate a referral and have somebody have a look at it rather than just going on cover. The idea here is that, being able to understand issues before they happen makes better use of the capacity and better use of any reinsurance and reinsurance treaties you might have in place. And again, historically been working, Simon mentioned, with the work we're doing with Allied World. So yeah, we've historically worked with capacity providers on this, where they're looking to set limits and then apply those limits out through their MGAs. But more recently, we've had MGAs coming to us and saying, actually turning that problem on its head and saying, well, we have capacity from a series of different capacity providers. We want to make sure that we make the best use of that capacity and don't end up overexposing ourselves in certain areas. So demonstrating that we're good custodians of that capacity. And again, having that same capability for an MGA is equally or as important as it is for a capacity provider. And again, we can do it with the Cresta zones, the fire blocks. We can set limits on any geography. If you've got specific zones you're interested in, or postcode zones or postcode sectors or census boundaries, we can do this with any kind of shape. Anything that we can draw as a shape on a map, we can create a rule and policy for. And again, it's all really around this RAG status, so keeping it simple. So we don't, the system that we've created and the API we've created, we recognize not everyone's going to want to be via API showing and saying, okay, this is our total exposure and providing financial information, but we can actually simplify that down to a RAG status. So red, please don't write it. Amber, you can go ahead and refer it and we'll have a look. And green, go ahead, without necessarily exposing some of that more sensitive financial information. So I'm going to show really briefly what that looks like on the tool. So we have at the moment, this is a capability we're working on. So what I'm going to show you at the moment, if I go back into the tool and I go over to St. Paul's Cathedral. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn those fire blocks back on that we were looking at earlier. So yeah, at the moment, as I say, in this tool here, we have this great view with the various different fire blocks and the other perils that we've shown. What I'm going to show you at the moment is a simple radial view using the same information, but we're in the process of actually taking the same concepts that we've built here. As I say, this is a new tool. This is something that went live on the 1st of September, so we're extending this out. And we're going to provide the same view that you see here back into our underwriting tool, which some of you may be familiar with. It's widely used by a number of MGAs and capacity providers, but again, providing that same level over here. So again, if I go over here into our underwriting tool, and I want to write Zara in one new change, which should give me the view. Bear with me, and I'm just going to. What I'll do is I'll take us to another one to give you an idea of the view. I don't have the example to hand, but if we go in here, you can see at the moment it provides us with a total accumulated exposure view. So that's going to provide us with a view of the different properties that are around us, and at the moment that's given us a radial view. But the idea is that with the new capability that we're providing, with the new API that we're going to be deploying over the next 3 months, is that you'll have exactly that same view here with a much simpler understanding of this is my exposure within a radius, and that might be a 200-meter radius, a 500-meter radius, or within a fire block, and then any rules that you'd like to associate with that. So again, for something like a radial view works very well with a peril, a quake peril, for example, whereas the fire block view is going to give you a much more nuanced view. So a 200-meter radius here is going to take us all the way out here, and it's probably going to include some properties that we're not interested in. But again, providing that view within a fire block level is allow you to be able to make much better policy and be able to apply that to a much more nuanced and specific view. And at that point, I'm going to hand back to Simon, who's going to talk us through the post-event scenario.
Thanks, Mark. So this is just going to look at a couple of examples of events that have occurred, particularly in the United States. So if we just flick to the next slide, and we should poll on this. So yes, I think this is quite well developed within the marketplace today in terms of more and more access to data about events, both historic and real time. So we just wanted to poll the audience with the question, how long does it take you to understand potential losses following an event? It is, we get the clear guidance from our clients that one of the questions at an underwriting level that comes down the chain very, very rapidly upon an event occurring is a quantification of the level of expected loss as a consequence, or, you know, the building's on fire and the television news is reporting it. The question is, how much have we got, if any, hopefully nothing, on that location? So we're building that type of information that looks at the event boundaries for such things as fire events, but also hurricanes, tornadoes, such things, and being able to analyze the information. So the results that are coming back are that, yeah, 20% of the audience within 3 days, 40% of the audience within a week, and 20% within a month, and 20% do not have access to such information about potential losses post-event. So yeah, thank you very much for that. And we'll move on to, I think the next slide just puts us through back to, oh yeah, to quickly understand potential losses following these events. Both custom boundaries and predefined boundaries are important. Custom, i.e. ones that you typically would draw yourself within the user interface. And secondly, predefined ones such as, for example, the Lloyd's RDS disaster scenarios, such as the Thames barrier overtopping. That would be a predefined footprint that would be stored within the platform and could be called at any time. And then we're going to be building an event library with partnerships from organizations who are typically running satellite and other aerial photography mechanisms for identifying very rapidly the extent of events as they occur. So you'll do a quick example of that, shall we, Mark?
Yep.
Yeah, it was just, well, I'm a bit conscious of time, so I'm going to the principles are very similar to everything you've seen thus far, but we bring forward this Your Events panel on the right-hand side. And at the moment, this has 2 event locations in it, but this will be significantly larger, whether it's one's data that you draw and build and save, or whether it's predefined, such as RDSs, or whether it's real time. So what we have here is a hurricane for Hurricane Ian. The forecast is only coming off NOAA recently, back in 2022. And then secondly, we have another windstorm view on that. If I remember rightly, one's reality and one's was the earlier prediction. Am I right in saying that, Mark?
Yeah, that's correct. So the first one there is where NOAA expected it to make landfall. So that was the full coast cone. And then obviously that's how it actually transpired. It shifted down a little bit and then ended up actually taking out part of Cuba as well. Yes. So that's showing both of those different views.
And like you've seen the tool operating thus far, it's bringing forward the net exposure number, the locations that have been affected, and the ability to identify through the table and download through the table the locations. Here, we've just drawn a custom shape very arbitrarily, but you can do that very detailed as well, zooming in, but we've captured an area, again, this time much larger and has over 20,000 locations inside of it. So I hope that gives you some sense as to the flexibility of the tool. And we'll be, one of the pieces we're going to do is a storm track with a buffer and the stated buffer distance from the line, and being able to then pick up that buffer, and in the same manner as this, it creates a polygon that you can bring the results back from.
Yeah, so, as Simon mentioned there, so as well as the events, this will become much more sophisticated. There'll be filters on different event types, different names, years, both historic events as well as live events over time. And then also the ability to create events, save those, and then share those with your colleagues as well via the tool. Again, that's all new functionality we're working with. And again, this in terms of timelines, we're working on that in Q1 next year. So that be something by kind of April sort of time next year. Will that be something we'll be able to demo in its kind of full function?
Mark, do you want to move on to just cover the integration piece?
Yeah, sure. So I think we're pretty much done here now. So I'm just going to wrap up and just present this last bit. So this is all, as I say, it's great to have these new tools, but again, sometimes having these tools, having a new tool is not necessarily the best way to go. Actually taking this process and this data and this capability and embedding it in your own workflow is really where we'd like to see customers going. So the idea is having the risk tool that we've shown here to be able to do your post-bind and post-event analysis. But for that pre-bind where I gave a simple demonstration of looking up a radial search, we'd like to see that actually being used by customers in their own tools. So for us to be able to do that, we're providing you with an API. So again, I just wondered if we've got one last poll of the day, poll number 4, just really around where you're hosting your data. So really interested to understand if you're hosting this stuff in-house, if you're using the cloud. I know when we set up, so 2015, when we created Addresscloud, the cloud was still quite new at that point. But I think, now kind of 8 years on, actually having data and having a customer or having a provider like us hosting that data for you is probably less of a barrier than it was 8 years ago. So again, just I think in terms of time there, we're seeing about 80%. What I would expect, a good sort of 70-80% of you are leveraging and using cloud services in one shape or form. So that might be using public cloud like AWS, or potentially even private cloud, where you kind of get the best of both worlds. So I think we'll end the poll there just in the interest of time, and I'll just wrap up with the last couple of slides. So really this is all around saying, as I say, we have these API integrations, but we want you to be, we want our customers to be able to use these and make these decisions where you're doing your business. So we have an API integration. You can see, if for the techies amongst you, you can kind of see what's happening here. You can see that there's a radial approach coming back with a fire and the flood. So this is what we are building as we speak. And then over here, some of our existing partners that we have connections with already. So we work with people like Cytora and Send, Actress and Hyper Exponential. They have integrations into called our Match and our API service. But what we'd like to develop with these partners, and also with any other partners that you may be working with, or with your own IT teams, the ability to query that exposure layer in real time. Not only query it, but the point where you go on cover, actually sending that information. So we're going to make it available so that map can be updated via API in real time, which is really important. It's great having this data to being able to avoid an exposure, but if the data is a month or 2 months or 3 months old, that's going to limit its effectiveness. We want to get to the point where it's as close as real time as possible. So the use case there would be, I want to write this in risk in Canary Wharf. The first person comes along. Yep, that's fine. Go ahead. That information the policy gets bounced. The information pops into the system. The next underwriter who comes along and tries to write in that same location, if that's 10 minutes later, they should be said, oh, hang on a sec, you need to refer that because we're already reaching our capacity. And again, in terms of trusting us with your data, so this system would be predicated on you transferring data to us. So why are we a good custodian of that data? We're a data business. We have to go through, we work with the UK government for the Flood Re project, which we've been hosting for the last 2 years. So for us to be able to do that, we have to go through a huge amount of certification and cyber certification to be able to make sure that we're really looking after our customers' data and that you can trust us with the data that we're handling on your behalf. Not only that, the services have to be fast and reliable. So we work with RSA, for example. All of their quotations go through us. That needs to be 24/7. We need to be there whenever you need to use us. So all of these things are baked into Addresscloud from the get-go. And then Simon, I'll hand back to you just to conclude on the learning objectives.
Thanks, Mark. So yeah, we hope we've covered each of these. So the first one centered itself around addressing, and you've seen a lot about how we've gone to different locations across the world, but also importantly, how we've located the individual risks within building outlines in order to be able to make this calculation. So the importance of that and making the right choices and selections around the services you use for addressing are vital. Secondly, yeah, that business case at the pre-bind stage. So what we believe is on the table now is an immediate rather than a 1 or 3 month view. Number of people identified that there is daily access to the accumulated view. So that comparison between a new location being assessed for being written versus an up-to-date daily refresh of your accumulation position is eminently possible. And what one client told us is that what we're looking to do here is identify more of the green. We are absolutely fine to go and write this location, and some of the reds, which are like really concerning, rather than having to pass all of that data through a process that could take several weeks within the business. It gives that immediacy. The third element, we spent a lot of time talking about hotspot analysis in a post-bind context. So that more back office ability to assess the levels of accumulated risk against peril is something that is, and with the speed, I think, of the interface and the ability to drill right down and then be able to grab spreadsheets that are absolutely targeted at where you need to be spending underwriting time is key. And fourthly, the real-time events and also the historic events. It's a, I don't want to say it's a derivative of all of the others, but the capability is very much linked between the ability to look at geographical boundaries on maps in relation to your risk locations, together with really good analytics that enable you to be able to create the decision support views that you need. So we hope that we've expanded learning, and with that, we'd be happy to take the questions that you do have of us.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Mark. And yeah, we have a couple of questions which I think we've just about got time to cover. First of those is how long is the pre-quote information kept on the record to look at?
So this would be, I'm understanding here, so around, if, for example, a quotation, if we wanted to book out capacity for a quotation, so that's something that we would be configurable. So some of our customers, I think my understanding of the question here is, okay, I want to go ahead and I've got a proposal or schedule that's coming with a bunch of locations. I want to understand and see what that does to my book. And then also I want to kind of almost like book out some of that capacity for that quote. It's not something that we have available at the moment. It's something we're working on, and we've got a requirement in there from one of our customers who wants to be able to do that. The idea is that it would be configurable. So it might be that your quote would be valid for 30 days, and after 30 days you want it to drop off unless it gets converted to a policy, or someone might say, actually, I only want that for 7 days or 24 hours or whatever. So that would be configurable.
Thanks, Mark. And the second question I have is, if we have our own accumulation zones, can I add these?
Yeah, we can work with any spatial format. So if you're able to provide that to us as a map layer, spatially, absolutely, no problem at all. We're more than happy to come in and provide that. We're actually doing that with one of our customers at the moment, where we've actually helped them create that. They've got this kind of view of accumulated zones, which are kind of fairly rudimentary. It's a map where they've basically drawn some lines across the map, and then we've taken that, we've mapped that against official administrative boundaries to co-develop a set of accumulation zones. So yeah, more than happy to take those.
Great, thank you, Mark. And that concludes the questions. So I think we'll wrap up there. Just about on time. So just remains for me to say thanks so much for your time, Simon and Mark, today, and for your presentation, which I'm sure everyone will agree has been very useful, very interesting. You can reach Simon and Mark at the email address shown, or feel free to contact me at tim.richards@mgaa.co.uk with any questions, and I'll be happy to pass these on. Thanks also to all of you for joining us. Don't forget to provide your feedback, and do look out for forthcoming MGAA events. I do hope you all have a productive afternoon. Thanks again for joining us, and see you all soon. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Cheers.